Welcome to another episode of Twomey Mailbag. This week we are answering people's questions about debtors and debt recovery. It's not funny. What's funny about debt recovery? I don't know. Apparently it's funny. My name's Ben and this is Andrea. She can't keep a straight face. What we endeavour to do on this channel is to take real world legal questions and break them down into plain English to help individuals and business owners kick their business goals, essentially. If you've got any questions for us, don't hesitate to submit them. Either put them in the comments or send them to the email, which we'll link. And don't forget to follow and subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of this content. Also a disclaimer, this is not legal advice. Also a warning to uni students, don't cite us in your university assignments or exams because you 100% will fail if you do that. And that would be the right outcome if you ask me. Do you agree? Andrea agrees.
I do.
Stay tuned for riveting content.
I've got a question in, and this person we won't disclose what their name is. We'll just call.
Do a court search and you might find them.
Yeah, let's just call her Cheryl. What's funny?
That's actually her name. It's Cheryl.
Okay, I have someone chasing me for money. I have just been served with a claim and statement of claim. There are reasons why I haven't paid this person. However, I want to get some information about what it will cost me to run my defence and what risks there might be in doing so. I'm commercially minded, so if it's going to cost more to fight this person, then I am better off trying to resolve the problem rather than spending money on lawyers. How can we help Cheryl?
I'm going to assume, for the purposes of answering this question, that the amount of money that this person is chasing is big enough to justify commencing court proceedings against them. Obviously, you can sue someone for whatever amount of money you want, but the smaller the amount of money, the less commercial it is. I'm also going to assume that the person chasing Cheryl has got lawyers involved. So being commercially minded is good, but in order to get a resolution, a commercial one, it takes two to tango. So we've got to get the other party to the table first. So I think what Cheryl should do, the risks of Cheryl not doing anything is obviously that the person who's chasing her gets a judgment against her. And the judgment
do nothing.
Yeah, you can't do nothing. If you've been sued, you've either got to settle it if you can, and often you can't immediately, or you've got to file a defence or an appearance or whatever it might be, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in. I think what I would do if I was Cheryl would be to put a defence on that actually puts the work in to properly articulate why Cheryl says she's not liable to pay.
Yeah.
Hopefully then the lawyer who's acting for the person chasing Cheryl, we'll call her Cheryl's chaser, they then get the defence and they explain it to Cheryl's chaser and they say, hey, I know that you told me that you've got this great claim and I articulated it for you in the best way that I was able to, given your instructions. Cheryl says this in response. What the lawyer will probably do is then tell their client what the world's going to look like for them moving forward. And what that will look like for them moving forward is the proceeding, because a defence or similar has been filed, will go through all the steps that it needs to go through to get ultimately, usually through a mediation and then to a trial. That will then cost the other person and Cheryl money. And the lawyer will also advise the person who's chasing Cheryl that there's certain risks, and one of those risks is that Cheryl might win, and so Cheryl's defence might be a good defence. So putting the defence on forces that to happen. The difficulty with trying to settle it before you've put your case forward in the form of a defence is that Cheryl's chaser is just going to assume that their case is perfect, and that Cheryl is not paying them because Cheryl just doesn't want to pay them, rather than because Cheryl has a reason to not do that. Taking those steps is going to give Cheryl the best chance of getting a commercial resolution. But unfortunately, sort of using the boxing match analogy, what Cheryl wants to achieve is the other person tapping out. They're not going to tap out before the fight starts. You're going to have to dance a few rounds and wear a few punches before they realise that tapping out is a good idea, and putting your defence on, other than because you have to or else you get a judgment against you, is the first step in doing that. Conceiving a strategy to potentially... There's reasons to try to settle a matter sooner than a mediation, but there's also reasons not to. Despite being very commercial and very reasonable, again, you need to get the other party to come to the table. And it might be that the other party critically needs to think that you're not commercial or reasonable at all. they need to think that you're a psycho and that you're going to run this defence all the way to a trial. What's the truth?
Yeah.
So that it gives you the best chance of them realising that tapping out is a better idea than going to a trial against you and potentially losing and getting a cost order against them. So the more risk that the other side understands, and the understanding bit is the key bit, the more risk that they understand they are facing in not resolving the matter with you, the more likelihood there is of a settlement being reached. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, settling a matter, the parties have to meet somewhere, and if the other party doesn't appropriately realise the risk or value the risk or whatever it might be, then the chances of settling are pretty low. If there's two parties and one of them thinks that their case is perfect and no one, whether they might not have a lawyer acting for them, so no one has actually explained to them what the world looks like in reality and what the weaknesses of their case are, and even if their case is strong, what it all looks like for them in running it and all the risks of running a trial. If no one's actually explained that to them, they're not going to understand the risk of not settling, so it's going to make it harder to settle. So what was the question again, Cheryl? No, I'm joking. What will it cost me to run the defence?
Yeah.
What's it going to cost there?
Oh, look, I
It's a big
think
question.
going back to your point just now, both parties, if you're going to have a resolution, both parties are going to have to concede, to some degree. Otherwise, you're not going to meet in the middle. There's going to be no meeting of the minds. A mediated outcome or a negotiated outcome is never going to be a party's, best case scenario. Everyone's going to both sides are going to compromise.
We're talking about being content rather than happy.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what a settlement is.
Yeah.
It's people being content.
The way I look at cost to run a defence is, you're not going to achieve that outcome until you've actually, spent some money to setting up that appropriately, as you've just explained, and that's properly articulating a defence, getting advice so you know what situation you're in, Cheryl, and then obviously making sure that, you've given enough, maybe documents or evidence, whatever you have, to the other side to help their lawyer or them, if they're self-represented, understand what those risks are. So there is inherently going to be some costs involved in, getting to the point where, the parties are ready to mediate. In terms of how much it costs, it really depends.
Depends on what the fight's about.
It depends how complicated it is. Like, if it's a simple, straightforward, let's just say it's a loan amount. It doesn't matter if the loan amount is $20 million or $2,000. It generally costs the same amount.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start adding complicating factors, like it's not a straight loan, or, the claim is, something else. And I think, Cheryl just says that.
She says that there's reasons why she hasn't paid it.
Yeah. So it might be like she's engaged this person to do something, they've done faulty work or whatever. I forgot what I was going with that. What was I saying?
About the cost, it depends how many.
Yeah, so it can be complicated by the fact that you've then got to explain, and it might be that in explaining you've got to go into a bit of chapter and verse about this is what happened, this is my side of the story. So there is going to be costs involved, and it's hard to say exactly how much.
Yeah.
But I think if you think that you're going into this to get out your best case scenario, not spending a dime, that's unrealistic.
Good luck, Cheryl. I think a tip for any matter, but particularly, well, not particularly really, but a matter like this would benefit from where there's reasons why you haven't paid someone. So it's probably not a loan, because unless the reason for not paying her was she didn't actually give me the money. But assuming it was something different, it is so much easier for someone like a lawyer who's assisting you with your matter to understand what happened if you've got a chronological order of events and all the documents that relate to all the things. Often it's the first thing that we have to do, and it's if the client either hasn't got their material organised or they haven't done it themselves, it can be really, really expensive.
Yeah.
You've got to, the way that people communicate these days, it's I sent these 400 texts and then I have these 8 emails with 7,000 trailing emails, and it's just a complete mess. If the client can actually put together a chronology of events, the way that our brains work in understanding what happened, it tells the story for us a whole lot easier, so we can get our heads around it quicker.
And collating all the evidence.
We can understand where the holes are, so we know what further information we need from you, and we can give you a better idea of whether your case is any good or not sooner.
Yeah, I think giving like piecemeal instructions and, you know, having to wait for us to ask for, hey, what about this obvious document that we should be looking to? And then, you know, having to stop and start because we're waiting on documents and that type of thing, that can actually run up the costs a bit. So there's like a little bit of stuff in there that Cheryl as a client could do to make that process run smoother and therefore more efficiently and cheaper. But yeah, inevitably some costs involved.
She didn't really ask this question, but what if Cheryl uses ChatGPT to help her run her defence?
So the thing about ChatGPT is, you know, there might be some, you know, good stuff in there, but it needs to all be verified.
It makes stuff up.
It does make some stuff up, and we've definitely seen some stuff made up. And if we're going to have to verify everything a robot comes up with, instead of, you know, letting us use our expertise and experience, that will actually increase costs. So I understand, you know, from, you know, if Cheryl wants to do that, that she thinks that she's saving time, it might actually backfire and cost Cheryl more.
It also could be where the person chasing Cheryl doesn't have a lawyer, and where they're using, and we're not bagging AI, we think it's amazing. What we're seeing in practice though is where parties are using AI instead of seeing a lawyer. The role of the lawyer is to resolve the problem. The AI is helping the person advocate for themselves, and what is missing in that process when the person doing the suing or running the defence doesn't have the lawyer involved is there's no one to tell them the weaknesses of their case, because they're not usually asking, like they don't know how to prompt the AI to be able to draw those to their attention so they actually understand the risk that they're taking.
Yeah,
so,
and I think, like, I mean, obviously it's a robot, but, you know, if you've got a lawyer, part of the process of having a lawyer involves having some objectivity about it. So if you're feeding you know, OpenAI thing,
your side of the story,
you're only going to get back what helps you,
100%.
and it's not going to be an objective, like, devil's advocate approach to, you know, you might actually need to think about this, or there might actually be some risk, and what this person's saying might actually, you know, carry some weight. So that's the value that we're bringing to that process. And, you know, we've all seen disputes that have got way too far down the chain because nobody told the person or the parties at the, you know, outset what the risks were. And, you know, being involved in protracted litigation is, you know, the easiest way to waste money.
100%. It's good fun.
I'm just going to end on that note.
100%. Litigation is stressful, and if it can be avoided, you would prefer to avoid it than do it.
Yeah, I would also add that obviously
sometimes it can't be avoided though.
Yeah, so back to Cheryl's problem is that, you know, she's been served with a claim and statement of claim, and she says there's reason why she hasn't paid the person. It seems like there hasn't been a discussion prior to the claim being filed about what the parties, you know, sides of the story are, and I think that goes back to that, you know, half the reason, probably, well, it is half the reason. Half the reason we send a demand is to, you know, obviously we want that demand to be effective. Yeah. The collateral purpose of sending a demand is that we actually get to understand what the other side's position is prior to filing. And that's important because the claim, once you file a claim, you can't just withdraw it without any...
you nudge colours to the mast, you've said what your claim is, it's hard to depart from it.
So, you know, had they had this discussion earlier, and, you know, potentially without lawyers involved, particularly if she's commercially minded, they might have reached a resolution. Obviously, it depends on the nature of the other person and their character and, you know, what they're like.
About, so. That's a big question, Cheryl.
Yeah, it's a long question.
Yeah.
Good one, though.
Thank you, Cheryl. This question is from, what should we call him? We're on C's today. Let's call him Chris.
Okay, Chris.
It says, I am a small business. I think Chris has a small business. And he's having a problem with clients paying their bills. Some of them have been outstanding for some time, and I want to know what my options are for getting the money out of these people. This is going to be a pretty general response, but what are some of Chris's options?
Well, look, he's obviously got a volume of clients that are not paying their bills. So to me, this indicates a failure in the process of, you know, onboarding clients, making sure the terms are tight enough that you don't get to the point where you've got clients that haven't paid their bills. Obviously, in some industries, it's not possible to, tighten it up to the point where there's going to be no debtors. So in this instance, Chris has got debtors. It really depends on what the nature of the services are that he's providing and how much the amounts are. Because if it's like
$400,
$400, like
your options are limited.
Yeah. I mean, you might get a debt collector involved, and they'll charge you, some small percentage of whatever they're collecting to do that.
Or a big percentage of whatever they're collecting.
Strike rate, who knows?
Yeah.
If it's a larger amount and you've got your terms and conditions all pretty solid and you've performed the work, there's no issues with the work, then you're going to be looking at your debt recovery options. Do you want to talk about debt recovery options?
Sure. There's a few of them.
So
I think
probably
I think that the most important thing from my perspective is to sort of go to the end and look at the recoverability and then conceive a strategy based on the recoverability. For example, if it's a massive company and there's no dispute about the debt, then what you do is going to be different to what you might do if it was a tiny company or an individual and they've got no assets, for example. So no dispute about the debt, and
let's say the client that he's chasing is a company and there's no dispute about the debt.
And it's big enough.
You
would potentially issue the company with a creditor statutory demand as a precursor to applying for an order winding them up. It can be really, really effective, or it can be a step in the process to winding the company up. Yeah. Now, that doesn't necessarily get you paid. So it's a bit of a look. It's not. It can be high risk in the sense that a stat demand can be applied to a company who receives a stat demand can apply to have it set aside. If there's no dispute about the existence of the debt and there's no offsetting claim and it's not defective and all those fun things that we sort out, there's a limited basis to set it aside.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop them applying.
It doesn't stop them
if they're trying to avoid getting wound up and they're trying to avoid paying you. Usually, if the debt was enormous and they actually can't pay it, but they want to avoid being wound up, you might be dealing with an application to set it aside, even though there is no grounds. If it's smaller, the cost of applying to set it aside, so if it was 20 grand or something, the cost of applying to set the demand aside is probably going to be more than the cost of paying the debt. So it can be really effective there. Yeah. And what it also might be, this is why the strategy is key, it might be that the best chance of getting the money is for the company to be put into liquidation and to have a liquidator appointed so that you can then have access to the sorts of claims that a liquidator has or that arise in circumstances where a company goes into liquidation. We get super complicated here, but you might want to, there could be instances where like monies have gone into the company and they've been dissipated improperly. A house has been bought. Director's loans, or a house has been bought in the name of some related party or whatever it might be. But we need evidence of that. So you get the liquidator in there, you have the director publicly examined, you get access to a whole bunch of documents, and then you get the evidence that you need to run the case against that third party and, for example, seize and sell their house, which is something that happens.
It's a bit of a protracted process.
So that again is key. So in cases where you do that, you're looking at, you know what you're trying to achieve before you go down that path. So you know that, okay, the house is in that person's name, for example. We reckon the money's gone there, or we know the money's gone there. We just need more evidence to be able to run that case. How do we get it? Because that's where we know the pot of gold is. We're not expecting to get anything from the liquidation because we know that all the money in the company has been gotten rid of or whatever it might be. So what if it was an individual, or what if you've got a company who owes you the money, but you've got an individual of means who's a guarantor? Yeah. Or what's an option there?
Yeah, so, if it's an individual or a guarantor, and really depends on your terms, but you could be making a demand and suing that person for the debt. And you can include the guarantor. Sometimes you can just go against the guarantor and not against the particular person that you were doing the work for. That, in some instances could be fine. And going back to your point, it comes down to recoverability. Is this guarantor going to have the means to pay, or is the client, essentially defunct and never going to be able to pay? In which case, you decide not to go down that path and you go against the guarantor. But yeah, look, I mean, with individuals, you're essentially going to be, you really can't do a lot until you get to the point of judgment. Once you've got a judgment, there are so many enforcement options. And I mean, hopefully, but before you get to the point of judgment, you've got,
Get a deal.
you get paid. But, you know, in the instance where you don't, then you've got, you know, so many enforcement warrants that can be used, and, you know, potential bankruptcy notice, which is essentially the individual version of the creditor's statutory demand. So yeah, it's a few options for who was it again? Chris.
Thanks, Cherub.
Yep.
Cherub's behind the camera making sure this all looks good. So.
And that we remember the name
And
of
remember
our
the names
individuals.
of these individuals who we've anonymised.
Yeah. So, I mean, also the tip that I would have for Chris is he says that some of his debts have been outstanding for some time. Obviously, the longer you leave debts outstanding, the harder they are to recover. I mean, in some cases, you might actually benefit from waiting a bit. And the reason I say that is, you know, let's say that Chris is an accountant and he knows about the financial position of his clients.
Exactly.
And he might understand that they don't have any money at the moment, but they're about to come into money.
Chris is going to know the time to have a crack.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are strategy decisions behind all of this.
100%.
But yeah, definitely acting on debtors like quickly is important.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You don't want these people, I mean, obviously if they're not paying bills, they could potentially be in financial distress. If they're not paying your bill, they might not be paying several
Everybody's
other bills.
bills, yeah.
And what you don't want is to leave it there on the assumption that one day you'll get paid, only to discover in the meantime that the client has paid everyone else and not you.
A benefit of acting sooner, one of many, a benefit of acting sooner can be that, let's say it's a company that owes you the money and they're in a bit of distress, but they're trying to work their way through it. They might, and you've just got a contract where the money is owed to you by the company, you've got no guarantor, no security, none of that stuff. You might, whether by yourself or through us, or any lawyer, there's heaps of this, make the demand, and they might say, hey, I can't pay you now, but I can pay you later.
Yeah.
That could be an opportunity for you to improve upon the terms in your contract and say, look, I'll give you time to pay, but the trade-off for time to pay is I want, depending on how much money is owed, I want a mortgage over the house in your unrelated party's name, or I want a personal guarantee from this entity, or from this personal entity over here who's got some money, or I want security, or whatever it might be. It can be a reason to get you in a better position, so that if potentially the inevitable happens and the company goes under, you are in a better position than you would otherwise have been in. I mean, this isn't sort of, we can't get fully into this in a session like this. There's instances where a liquidator can unwind that stuff, but they're the sorts of things that you might have available to you. Also, if you've got a business where you've got a lot of outstanding debtors, if it's a business where all of the debtors are for similar stuff, so let's say you supply a product for just a whole bunch of different people that owe you money for different amounts of this product that you've given them, all the terms of the contracts are all the same, all that sort of thing. It could be that giving them all to a lawyer to sort of run on a portfolio basis is going to be a super cost-effective way of going after it. The reason for that is that but most lawyers charge based on time spent. If you give them a whole bunch of a similar type of matter, they're going to spend less time working through the matters, and they could probably do some stuff on the back end for themselves to automate some of the demands and some of the processes, which you'll then get the benefit of in cost savings. So I think the number one thing that we sort of hear from people is, how do I know that the time is right? If you're worried about potentially not getting paid by someone, that's when you talk to someone about it. Yeah. So the best case scenario is that you've overreacted and you didn't need to talk to someone yet. That's the best case scenario.
Yeah. And look, if you're concerned about maintaining the relationship with your clients, you know, there are ways we can go about it with sensitivity to, you know, potentially ghost the person.
100%. Thanks for your question, Chris.
Sure. This question ties in nicely with the last one. So it's from someone working in finance for a medium-sized business. They similarly have a debtor problem and want to know what they can do to give them the best chance to get paid without having to get court proceedings going. Let's call this person starting with C.
C. We've used Cheryl and Chris. Cherub's behind the camera, so we can't use Cherub.
Yeah.
Kathy.
Oh, Kathy.
With a C.
There you go, Kathy.
So Kathy works in finance for a medium-sized business. I'm assuming it's the finance team. Let's just call Kathy the CFO of this business. I think with these debt recovery questions, a lot of them are going to link to each other because they are all around the same or similar issues. You're trying to get paid.
Yeah.
I think the thing to be doing would be, if you want to avoid getting court proceedings going but giving yourself the best chance of getting paid, it's understanding what threat you can what legal threat you can bring before the debtor to make them pay.
Yeah.
So how can you be the biggest thorn in their side to make them pay? I mean, it's going to come down to going to, the building construction episode that we had, where, like, if you've got the ability to suspend the work that you're doing, or you've got the ability to suspend supply of the goods that you're supplying to them, or whatever it might be, that's something that you can dangle over them. If that's a critical service that they need, then you're the most important creditor. Yeah. So they're going to pay you first. Yeah. So it's about doing that. It's also about potentially, as we sort of dealt with in the last question, getting something going so that you can improve your position, where your contract might not have what it needs to have in it, or you might not have a security interest, or you might not have a guarantee from someone who's got assets, or whatever it might be. It could be an opportunity to renegotiate what essentially are credit terms with this particular client or with these clients, to again give yourself a better chance of getting paid in the event that they do go under, or they ultimately don't pay you, or you need to commence court proceedings against them. I think that dealing with the point of what gives me the best chance of getting paid without having to get court proceedings going, you might cost yourself more money by not doing it. So we often see, and sometimes you don't know, but filing court proceedings against people, where you've got proper claims and all those things, so you've ticked all the boxes there, it can actually be more cost effective than sending 400 letters back and forth.
There's a lot of time wasted in litigating by correspondence, and that is just a waste of time. So,
and also a lot of debtors, when you say, "Hey, if you don't pay me, I'll sue you," debtors will go, "Okay, sue me."
Yeah.
And if you don't sue them, they think you're never going to sue them.
Yeah, you have to follow through with your threat.
Yeah.
I think you give them sort of one chance and move on to court proceedings. But I think, what's her name again? Kathy. Kathy has a debtor problem. I think if you're in an industry where you've got a debtor problem, you want to actually look at your the people that you're working with before they become debtors, 100%. And maybe doing some checks on their background to make sure that they don't have any red flags on their credit report. Making sure that you've got terms in there that you're going to be able to pull some levers and make sure that they don't actually become a problem. I think as well that debtors, particularly ones in financial distress, but also some people are just generally like this. If they have a reason to not pay, they'll lean on that reason and not pay. Yeah. And whatever they can say or do to get out of paying, they will. So making sure that you're not giving any of your clients or whoever is whoever are the debtors, making sure they don't have a reason to wiggle out of it. Or it might not actually give them a reason, but the fact that they're coming up with things is actually going to hinder the process. So
getting back to the point of not wanting to commence court proceedings, if they are an excuse maker, the benefit of commencing court proceedings against them is that it forces them to put it in a court document in their defence.
Yeah, you've got 28 days.
And that pins them to it. And often you can tell with the excuses that they make that their excuses are just grasping at straws. It's like, okay, put your excuses before the court. And you'll often find that, you didn't want to get court proceedings going, but it gets you to where you want to go faster. Just because that's how these things work. So you want to be the biggest thorn in their side, metaphorically, to give yourself the best chance of getting paid, and that unfortunately might involve commencing court proceedings. So, good question, Kathy from Finance. I have a court judgment that a former client is to pay me $150,000. I've sent them a letter demanding payment, but they have not paid. How do I go about enforcing the judgment? Okay. We've spoken a lot about liquidation. Let's say that this is an individual.
Righto. Look, $150,000, not to be sneezed at. Definitely worth pursuing if you've got to the point that you've got a judgment.
I'll add some facts here. So this person's got an unencumbered property worth $2 million. What do you do?
Oh, look, you're going to be as quickly as possible getting a writ on that property. A writ is essentially, it's essentially a right to have someone seize and sell that property and recover whatever the sale proceeds are to pay the creditors or the person with the writ on the property. And it really takes that process out of the debtor's hands. So you're not actually relying on anyone to do anything that, who's not going to cooperate. Putting the writ on the property would probably be the first move. There are others.
Bankruptcy notice.
Yeah, bankruptcy notice. I mean, it's definitely enough money to do that. And that obviously, going back to the session we did on where we talked about the liquidation process, ultimately, if you're bankrupting someone, it might not get you paid. You might get cents in the dollar. But at the same time, there is enough pressure on someone who does have means or the ability to get some funds from someone and wants to avoid bankruptcy, to actually come up with something. It might not be, maybe they don't come up with a full 150, but they can get enough money together to get something that you're content with.
Well, they can get it. They can get it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So they can get a lend from someone, and then they are the creditor, and you're not the creditor anymore, and you get your money. So instances where people would probably want to avoid bankruptcy is where it would affect their licenses and whatever else. So that can be a really effective way of getting a judgment paid.
And look, in that instance, is this person's got an unencumbered property worth $2 million and they're being served with bankruptcy notice. They might, assuming they've got the means to service a debt, they might just take out a
get some more debt.
Yeah, get some more debt, take out a home loan, repay you, deal with the problem creditor. The only trouble with that is you've just got a judgment, so you've probably impacted their ability to get finance. But if it's the financier knows that it's going to be used to pay a judgment debt that puts them in the best position and they're secured, then that might work. There's 2 million good reasons to pay that debt.
Good question. Do you want to do the next one?
Yep. Charlie has mailed in today. Charlie says, I have a client who is a big corporate who owes me money and has for in excess of 90 days. We were working with them for a few years, but the jobs we were doing with them have finished, and now we can't get them to pay our final invoice. How do I know when it is the right time to escalate the matter, and when should I see a lawyer? Question goes on. I want to get paid, and I'm happy to pay to have a lawyer to do the work for me. However, I don't want to speak to a lawyer too early if paying the lawyer is something I can avoid. So let's break this down. How do I know? Yeah. How do I know when it's the right time to escalate the matter, and when should I see a lawyer?
I think you probably already should have seen a lawyer, Charlie. People wanting to avoid, everybody wants to avoid big legal bills. But it might be that taking action sooner and seeing someone to give you good advice about your best chance of getting paid, for example, even though it's money that you pay them sooner, that means that the money that you ultimately pay them over the journey is less because they can do some stuff that might be available to you at that point. Getting back to something that I mentioned in response to one of the other questions is you want to look at where is the money coming from. So you're not working with them anymore, so there's no issue of trying to preserve some commercial relationship or anything like that. So you want to be looking at, does this business or does this corporate have the means to actually pay you? And that then informs whether the answer to that is yes or no, and if not, where you can angle it. That informs the steps that you'll take. A lawyer, I mean, you don't need a lawyer to help you work through that, but you sort of don't know what you don't know. So a lawyer should be able to give you better guidance in how to work through it. It might, just because you've seen a lawyer about it doesn't mean that the lawyer goes and then starts, throwing grenades at the other party and making it cost a fortune. It might be that the advice from the lawyer is, this is the best way you should go about it, and this is how you can do it without me.
And look, there's no need to commit beyond just getting some initial advice anyway. So I feel like having that first conversation and getting steered in the right direction.
100%.
Could be, actually might not cost that much and will set you on the right track.
Yeah, and there's a few searches that can be done and a few ways of analysing these things that can give you an idea of the best way to go about getting paid. I think it comes back to looking at timing. My view has always been, if you're worried about not getting paid, that's when you're talking to somebody. Because you might be able to put something in place to give yourself a better chance of getting paid in the event that the client ultimately, is liquidated, or obviously it's a corporate client, so that's certainly a risk here. Again, being the biggest thorn in their side and making it easy to pay you, or also identifying that if there is a real risk of not getting paid, what can we do to try to extract a settlement offer? So let's say they owe you 500 grand. If you've got limited prospects of getting paid, getting 150 out of them might be better than nothing. So figuring that out early doors, and then conceiving a strategy that gives you the best chance of achieving that is key. Engaging in the legal process is just the cost of doing business. And again, the prevention.
And you probably learn from that, and it might not happen again. And you pay your school fees on one, and then one and done.
Yeah, exactly.
But I actually think the second part of the question was about, my computer's died. Don't want to speak to a lawyer if he or she can resolve it themselves. I think we've seen a few clients tackle, things on their own, and you might miss something, which then creates a bigger problem than it should have been. So I think early intervention is pretty important.
100%,
yeah. You don't want to, we've also seen people trying to tackle it on their own, and they're, inadvertently making admissions, or making, releasing too much information, or not releasing, that's probably the wrong word, disclosing too much information to the other side, making concessions about things, indicating to the other side that, you don't really want to have to go to court. But if we were to be getting involved, we might actually have, put a different tone on it, so that you're giving yourself the best chance early on.
100%. Act soon, bet early to avoid disappointment, prevention better than cure, all those things are relevant here. So thanks very much for the question. That's it for another episode. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And if you've got any questions you want us to answer, either send us an email. We'll put the email in the comments, or make a comment down below. Just go easy with identifying yourself and those sorts of things if you want to maintain confidentiality. Thanks very much.